What happens when a growing immigrant population becomes the center of controversy? In some countries, Indians are unfairly blamed for economic, social, or cultural tensions. But what's really behind these claims? Let's find out. Welcome to our channel. Today we uncover the top 10 countries where the Indian population is being blamed, rightly or wrongly, for local crises. Whether it's job competition, housing shortages, or cultural clashes, Indian migrants often become scapegoats in difficult times. But is the blame justified? Watch till the end to find out the real story. 10. South Africa. South Africa has a long-established Indian community, especially in Durban. However, during times of political and economic instability, this minority often becomes a scapegoat. Some locals accuse Indian-owned businesses of economic monopolization and job exploitation. Tensions peaked during the 2021 riots, when Indian neighborhoods were specifically targeted. The perception that Indians dominate retail and trade fuels resentment among black South Africans who feel economically sidelined. In reality, the causes of unrest are far more complex, rooted in poverty, inequality, and historical injustice. Still, Indian South Africans are blamed for contributing to wealth gaps and racial division. Despite generations of presence, they are often viewed as outsiders during national crises. 9. Malaysia. In Malaysia, ethnic Indians, mainly Tamil descendants, form about 7% of the population. Despite contributing greatly to Malaysian culture and economy, they're frequently blamed for social and religious disruptions. Some Malay nationalist factions accuse Indians of challenging Islamic norms, particularly through political activism or temple-related disputes. During economic downturns, Indian Malaysians face discrimination in employment and education. Their involvement in civil protests, like the 2007 Hindraf rally, led to government crackdowns and claims that Indians are a source of unrest. Stereotypes about crime and poverty among Indian communities worsen public perception. Although many Indians are hard-working citizens, political and racial narratives often portray them as a destabilizing force. 8. Kuwait. Kuwait hosts around 1 million Indians, making them the largest foreign community. Most work in construction, domestic help, and healthcare. Despite their contribution, Indians are often blamed for overcrowding, rising rents, and traffic congestion. Some Kuwaitis argue that the heavy reliance on Indian workers suppresses wages and limits job opportunities for locals. Anti-expat sentiment increased during the COVID-19 pandemic, when calls to reduce the Indian population grew louder. Lawmakers proposed legislation to cap Indian nationals at 15% of the population. Critics argue this is a way to shift blame for poor infrastructure and unemployment. In truth, Indians fill critical labor gaps, but are still seen as responsible for national pressures. 7. Qatar. Qatar's booming economy depends on migrant labor, with Indians making up a significant part of its workforce. Most work in construction, service, and health sectors. However, the large Indian presence has triggered accusations of overpopulation and cultural erosion. Some Qatari citizens feel that migrant workers, particularly Indians, are responsible for traffic congestion, strained housing, and lower wages for locals. As Qatar prepares for global events like the World Cup, scrutiny over its labor policies has intensified. While Indians have helped build modern Qatar, they're still blamed for overwhelming public services and driving down wages. These accusations often ignore the fact that it's government policies, not immigrants, that determine labor conditions and economic planning. 6. United Arab Emirates, UAE. The UAE is home to over 3.5 million Indians, outnumbering native Emiratis in many regions. Indians have played a vital role in building the country, yet some locals accuse them of taking over jobs, businesses, and even cultural spaces. In times of inflation or job scarcity, Emiratis complain about wage suppression due to Indian labor. There's also anxiety about the loss of national identity, with Indian languages, foods, and festivals becoming highly visible. Despite strong ties between India and the UAE, nationalist voices occasionally demand limits on Indian immigration. However, these sentiments ignore the UAE's dependence on Indian professionals and laborers who sustain key sectors of the economy. 5. Singapore. Singapore's Indian population includes citizens, permanent residents, and foreign workers, particularly in tech and healthcare. While Indians are respected for their skills, there has been a growing online backlash, especially against Indian expats perceived to be taking high-paying jobs from locals. This sentiment intensified during the pandemic and after the introduction of work passes like the SICA agreement between India and Singapore. Many Singaporeans blamed Indian professionals for job competition and housing pressures. Online forums and political debates saw a spike in xenophobic comments. The government has defended fair employment practices, but public perception often scapegoats Indians for economic stress and overrepresentation in elite job markets. 4. Australia. Australia has seen a surge in Indian migration, especially students and skilled workers. With rising living costs and housing shortages, some Australians blame Indian migrants for adding to the crisis. Indian students are sometimes viewed as overloading the education and rental sectors, while professionals in IT and healthcare are accused of undercutting local workers. Media occasionally fuels this narrative by highlighting incidents involving Indian immigrants, creating fear and division. While many Indians integrate well, isolated cultural clashes or visa-related frauds receive widespread attention. The Indian community, despite being largely peaceful and productive, faces growing resentment as immigration becomes a contentious political issue in Australia. 3. United Kingdom. The Indian community in the UK is among the most established and successful. However, political rhetoric, especially post-Brexit, has turned immigration into a divisive issue. Indians are sometimes blamed for putting pressure on the National Health Service, NHS, social housing, and public education. Indian students and skilled workers face visa restrictions based on claims that they take away local opportunities. Anti-immigration groups also accuse Indian businesses of monopolizing certain industries. Incidents involving Indian migrants are exaggerated in some media outlets, reinforcing negative stereotypes. Though Indians contribute heavily to the British economy, they're often scapegoated during debates on overpopulation, integration, and national identity. 2. Canada. Canada has welcomed a large number of Indian students and immigrants in recent years. But with rising housing costs, overwhelmed educational institutions, and job shortages, public opinion has started shifting. Indians, especially students, are being blamed for crowding cities, inflating rents, and straining resources. Some critics claim that the influx has diluted education standards and created labor imbalances. Anti-immigrant protests and viral videos targeting Punjabi migrants have increased in Ontario and British Columbia. Although Indian immigrants fill labor shortages and boost the economy, political parties and media have started pointing fingers. Policy changes are now being introduced to reduce student intake, largely because of backlash tied to this rapid population growth. 1. United States. The U.S. has the second largest Indian diaspora, with professionals dominating fields like tech, medicine, and engineering. However, this success has sparked resentment in some circles. Indians are blamed for job competition, especially in the IT sector, where the H-1B visa program is seen as favoring Indian applicants. During economic downturns, locals accuse Indian immigrants of undercutting wages and outsourcing jobs. Political groups have called for immigration reform to limit Indian influence. Racially motivated attacks and online hate have increased in recent years. Despite their achievements, Indian Americans are targeted in debates on overpopulation, job theft, and even political interference. Their growing visibility has made them easy scapegoats in polarized times.